Welcome back to another episode of the Crime Scene Insiders. I'm one of your hosts, Dion Watson, and I'm joined by my co-host, Angela Davies. And we are going to take you back under the barrier tape.
Today we are going to be discussing a really important topic, which is mental health on the front line. We're going to be discussing how repeated trauma and working in crime scene investigation impacts mental health. And we're joined today to do that by a very special guest, Rebecca Jones, who is currently Deputy Head of Life Sciences at Anglia Ruskin University and also ex-crime scene investigator. Welcome, Rebecca. And
hello.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, because we know how busy you are. So we really appreciate you coming along today. To get us started, could you maybe give us a little bit of background about yourself and tell us about your career path and how you came into crime scene investigation?
Yeah, sure. So I was a crime scene investigator for 15 years in the end. My route I ended up studying a degree in forensic science at what was Anglia Polytechnic University, now Anglia Ruskin. And actually, it was during my second year that I applied to what was the Forensic Science Service to be an evidence recovery lab person. And that was all when ANPR came around. So it was all when VCSEs, so volume crime scene examiners, were all funded by the government. So they needed more people, obviously, in the labs. Because it was government funded, they pulled the plug on the funding. So I didn't have a job.
Really?
So then I was sort of back in the melting pot with everybody else and applying for whatever came up. So that's when what used to be SOCO, now CSI, came up. I thought, right, let's go for it, see what happens. And 15 years later, moved around a couple of forces. So that's how I got into crime scene investigation.
So which force did you originally go to work with as a crime scene investigator?
So it was Bedfordshire.
Bedfordshire first.
And it was the time, obviously things are very different now with career structure within crime scene investigation. You know, you have your level ones, your level twos. Back then, as you're well aware, you were a CSI, you were a SOCO full blown. So that's the position I took up. It was still the time when police officers were in those roles as well. So it was mixed civilian and police officers. And then later on, obviously, it all went civilianised, but there weren't many jobs. So there were a lot of applicants going. So at the time I took the job, said, yeah, brilliant. I knew Bedfordshire. I mean, bear in mind, I lived in Herts, Essex border. So I knew I had some travel.
That must have been quite a travel for you, wasn't
Well,
it?
Took the job. They were like, oh, yeah, it's not going to be Luton anymore. It's Leighton Buzzard. So I went, yeah, that's cool, fine.
That's all right.
And then it was actually my other half that said, do you know where Leighton Buzzard is, Bex? No. Bedfordshire, obviously. Looked it up. So I was travelling 108 miles a day.
Wow.
Yeah, for my first job.
That's
but again, it was competitive. It was a foot in the door.
You have to, when they come up, you've got to take them, haven't you?
Yeah. So that's where I was based.
What did you do when you were on call?
Well, this is
Sleep in your car.
No, nearly. I did start to travel back, especially when I was being trained up. Obviously, I was going to be on call with somebody else. So, you know, they were a lot nearer and they were aware of my travel time. But obviously then when I was fully fledged, able to go out by myself and be on the on-call rota by myself, luckily my grandparents lived in Milton Keynes, which was a little bit nearer. So I used to stay with them when I was on call. Just so at least then I was half hour, 40 minutes away rather than hour and a half.
Yeah, much better.
Yeah. So that's how I got kind of around that. But yeah, thankfully I only had to do that for about 7 months, 8 months, and then got moved to Luton. So then that cut the journey down to about an hour.
Still a long trek, but better.
Yeah. But then, you know, Luton is so busy. And that exposure was brilliant at the time, getting a lot of experience in a very, very short amount of time on major crimes, obviously call outs, and just your day-to-day stuff as well was just busy all the time.
Really?
And then I moved to Herts, place over to Hoddesdon. And
is that a bit quieter?
Yes, in some ways, obviously compared to Luton, everywhere was quieter.
Yeah.
But Hoddesdon had a real mix because you were dealing with obviously rural crimes and obviously your major stuff, your volume stuff. And it was varied because you were going almost to the border of sort of Met ground. Yeah, interesting. A lot of cross-border bits and pieces going on.
That was really interesting.
Kept us interesting. And then I moved to Stevenage as well. So then that's when the forces then started to, what was called at the time, merging.
Yeah.
Collaborating.
Yeah.
So that in the end became Triforce with Beds, Hearts and Cams. So I ended up back in Luton quite a lot.
Trying to get away from Luton.
Luton, going down to Watford, all sorts. Yeah. So
you covered a vast amount of area and worked in a number of different settings in that case, from rural to city. So the amount of crime and the kind of spectrum of crime you must have seen must have been quite vast in your time.
Yeah, it was. And when you say about covering the ground, obviously you're covering at that point 3 counties when it became Triforce. And crime types exposed to a huge amount. Like I said, Luton was, your day-to-day stuff, your burglaries, commercial burglaries, cars, all that side of thing was just always going on in the background. But obviously then you had a lot of major crime as well.
It was a bit similar in that I started in Bedlington. And I was covering Northumberland, which is a really rural area, but really vast as well. So we'd go up as far as Berwick on the border with Scotland, and then across to Hexham as well. So it was quite a big area. So sometimes you'd be driving over an hour just to get to a job. And on a sunny day, it was lovely, I have to say. We could drive in Northumberland countryside. But it was crimes such as theft of red diesel or burglary to an outhouse, that kind of thing. And then I moved down to Gateshead, which made the travel from my home shorter. But the crime type changed so much, and it was much busier, but it was much more violent crimes, inner city crimes. And it was interesting. I don't think you sometimes realise until you've done it and experienced the difference in nature of crime in different areas. And you're like, oh, this is definitely busier. Where's my lovely rural drive for an hour?
And that's it. It's funny, actually, because a lot of people used to say to me, Leighton Buzzard, you must be really bored. And I was like, no, because again, you have that mixture. So you had like your farms, and your machinery and all sorts. You'd be dealing with that one minute, and then you'd be going into Dunstable, which again is your built up area and different crime types as well, and the different demands as well that come with that.
Yeah, definitely. Did you have a favourite? Did you prefer working rural or in a city?
Like I say, in the summer, rural was lovely.
Yeah.
See the odd lamb now and then. Yeah, good question, actually. I don't know. I liked getting the experience of the major stuff, but I think the more that you do it, not that you become numb to it, but it's like, oh, here we go. You've got a long slog ahead with the hours. If it's major crime, and as you both know as well, you could be on it for a day, you could be on it for 2, 3, 4 weeks. It just depends. So I think the more you do it, you're like, here we go. It's going to be a long shift. Phoning your partners going, don't expect me home. And I think when I was probably younger, and I'm not ancient, but I think you can keep up with that a lot more, because obviously then your sleep gets affected. Long shifts, it takes its toll after a while, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. And I think when you're younger, it's all exciting. You don't mind the long shifts, but then when you start to have responsibilities and what have you, it changes over time, I think. So to have a favourite, yes, I probably loved all the fast-paced investigations, the major stuff when I was sort of newer in the career.
15 years, again, is a good time span to be in the force and to see a heck of a lot in that time frame.
And the changes as well within forces.
What were some of the biggest changes that you saw across your time?
That career structure come through a little bit, and that was towards the end of my sort of career, where they started you always had your volume crime, so like your VCSEs and soccer, and they kind of separated it out that way. But I think the career structure they've got in place now is better. You have your level 1, your level 2, level 3. Obviously, then you have your covert side of things as well. I think restructuring, where forces went through restructuring. I had to apply for my own job as a SOCO at one point, and we had to do almost like what they have to go through now with all the ISO accreditation with the competency. We had to do a competency-based scene exam, and then we were kind of graded from that.
Really?
And
even
some
though you're
people,
doing it day in, day out.
Yeah. And thankfully, I only had to go through it once, but it was stressful. I was probably in for about 7 years or so at that point. So that's some of the change. And then obviously the budgets with police forces and how, there was restrictions. I think you always used common sense, when you were submitting evidence. But then, service level agreements kicked in with how many things you could send off, chemical development and what type of things. And then it came down to offence type. And I think that's where all the budget started coming in.
It's terrible, that really, isn't it? And I don't think people realise how much budget is put on criminal investigation and on forensic submissions. I think for me, well before I got into force, probably a bit naive. I just assume that if a crime takes place, you investigate it and you spend whatever needs to be spent. And actually, we had some big budget changes, didn't we? To the point where we had to send off fingerprints first internally to see if we got an ident before we could even send off DNA. And we used to have to scrap to try and get DNA sent off. And we used to have really good reason and justification for wanting it to go.
Because if, like you say, if you got the fingerprints, we could have a good case of actually why fingerprints and DNA would be useful to go off, because you might have more than one offender or whatever the circumstances were. Like you say, we would always justify it, but they would never let them go off until we had fingerprint results first, and everything just sat there, which was a shame.
A bit frustrating at times.
Yeah.
And then I think the other change, which I suppose leads on to what we're going to be discussing, is I think the demand on the role. Obviously, we were all single crewed. Then obviously with the forces started combining to bigger geographical areas. And then obviously ISO accreditation, which you still got the demand to go to the jobs. But then I think forces then had to determine what was going to yield results and detections, and that's why certain forces don't go to car thefts, for example, now, or shed burglaries, whereas we went to pretty much everything. And triaging came in and all that side of things. And I think you'd literally bounce in from one job to another and you didn't really have downtime, if that makes sense. Not that you want a nice little lull around, but you would literally just go for one. You didn't have time to decompress. And obviously where the shifts changed as well and the demand and the bigger areas, sometimes you wouldn't see people in your shift. Obviously you see your injured parties and you see police officers, but it's literally at the job, move on. And I'll never forget, I had one job, and it's not a particularly nice one, but deceased person was found in their flat, and unfortunately her pet dog had started to eat her.
Not
I've
seen
nice
a couple of those. It's such a weird
not
thing,
pleasant.
isn't it?
Not pleasant at all. And it was actually the first time I've come across that extent of it. Was obviously her face, arm, chest area. Well, wasn't there. So yeah, quite distressing to see, even though I've seen all sorts of other horrible things, but I just needed that kind of decompression from that job. I just needed 10 minutes just to kind of go, okay, because that's not something that you see all the time.
Not. And it is weird, isn't it?
It's weird.
A weird thing to see.
It's sad as well, and I think some people forget that we have got emotions as well, and that we need to process that, because nobody should be left like that. Nobody should be found like that. And I never forget, I called into the job and said, I'm complete. Okay, right, next job. And I was like, can I just take 10 minutes?
Just give me a minute.
Yeah, but you needed to go to this next job. And I said, I'm telling you, I'm taking 10 minutes. And I just had to kind of do that as my own boundaries and just, like I said, to decompress and kind of get your head around it and then go, right, compartmentalise and off to the next job. And I think because of that demand, that constant demand, you're working with people that have never been out into these scenes, and they're doing their role, within the control room, and that's their role, and that's their aim, is to get you on to the next jobs. But it's that kind of demand, and I think where that comes in, well, certainly did, I think it has slowed down a little bit, and maybe, with ISO accreditation, because there is so many procedures and things to go through. Certainly the CSIs that I've spoken to that are now obviously in that role, with all of that kicked in, they're not going to as many jobs because obviously they've got to go through so much protocol as such now.
So much.
Well, I think from people that we've talked to that are still in force, they're getting to one maybe 2 jobs
Yeah.
a shift,
Yeah.
which is nothing, is it?
No.
Not
No,
compared
when
to
you-
what we used to do.
No.
We
No.
could be on ridiculously busy days. We could be hitting between 8 and 12.
Yeah.
How about
Yeah.
you? What was it like for you when at your peak?
I mean, like your day in, day out stuff, your volume stuff in Luton, because it's so compact. You know, some of your jobs are literally, you might have a whole street that's been, you know, attempt burglaries overnight, etc. So you'd be pushing on 11, 12 a day. Wouldn't be unusual for that. And then obviously you don't know what else is going to come in between with
That's
that as
it,
well.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that is your volume stuff, because you wouldn't get through major crime at that rate, of
No.
course. But
No. But yeah, your volume sort of stuff. Yeah, easily. And even when I was travelling around, you know, doing the rural, you'd still be trying to clear your area of jobs before the late turn came in as well. So you'd be picking up, and you might only start with 4 or 5, but obviously as the day goes on, more comes in. And that kind of changed as well. You know, that was something, and it was just, I suppose, like an unwritten rule. That if you were early turn, you would pick up, clear up. So late
clear us up
turn,
as much as
you
you
try
can.
not to let, because obviously late turn, we all know, tends to be more stuff comes in, and it's more of the major stuff, particularly on a weekend and full moons.
So very true.
So true, isn't it?
God help you if you get a full moon on a bank holiday weekend.
And you're on call. Yeah. That was it. You knew you were in.
Yeah.
Always try and put annual leave in for those days.
You might as well just
Yeah.
put a bed in the station on those weekends, mightn't you?
But that's it. You kind of, I think, obviously now, and I saw it sort of towards the end before I left, that you had your control rooms. Whereas when I first started, you were just kind of left the control room. You could obviously log in with them and log your jobs, but you didn't have anybody sort of directing you and coordinating all of that. Whereas they also to have their own control rooms now for the CSIs. And I found it was whoever was next, and not actually looking logically travel wise. And again, that takes its toll on you over time. We all know driving is draining anyway, but you've got that mental load of doing the jobs, writing it up, and then you might have another 2-hour drive to another job doing the same, and then you're getting sent, you're like, and you sit there and it can be really frustrating, because you're like, literally you hear somebody else getting sent to something that's 10 minutes from you, meanwhile you're getting sent 2 hours away. So I think that was a huge change when that all came in, and the frustration that came with that. And again, it's that feedback process and things improve, but yeah, that was a big change.
It's difficult when you're in it though, isn't it?
It is, or you keep hearing you're the only late turn.
Yeah. You're the only one on duty. I'm not. There's somebody else round here.
Yeah, it must be.
It's got to be. You've seen the area I'm covering.
So yeah, I think there's all sorts of things that have changed. Some are for the better, but yeah, I still think the actual role itself, it still takes a toll on mental health. You're still seeing things that aren't normal, and you're seeing them a lot. And I think that's what people that haven't done the job, or within police in general, don't necessarily understand, is it's the frequency of that exposure. You know, and police officers are obviously exposed to some of the things, but they're not necessarily going to one after the other with the amount that CSIs do. And then I think on the flip side, you have people going, well, that's your role. That's what you signed up for. And it's like, yes, you know, that's going to be part of your job. But I'd never forget a colleague that had just had one death after another, one fatality after another to deal with. And this is when there wasn't collision forensic investigation around so much. We were the ones going to those.
The collisions.
Colleague had a horrendous job to deal with there. Then another really odd suicide to deal with, industrial accident. It was just one thing after another. And you had that camaraderie within your unit as such, that you're always checking on each other. Again, like I said, where you're starting to cover bigger areas and that bigger demand, you're not necessarily seeing everyone. And I think that was also a huge shift. And I noticed that within myself. You'd all, at the end of your late turn, pretty much you'd see everyone, you go through your jobs, going, oh, you know, and it was, I mean, some people, it's not banter. It was that literally that decompression going, I went to this. Have you ever seen this before? You know, and you pass a bit of intel between yourselves as well.
Yeah.
And I think that started to go. And I think with the way you used to decompress and chat about your jobs, that was you're offloading, you're
Yeah.
processing. And that started to go because you were covering huge areas. You wouldn't necessarily see your colleagues at the end to be able to do that.
That's not very good at all, is it?
Such a
We
shame,
often
isn't
No.
it?
It is. We often talk about talking with your colleagues because they're seeing the same kind of thing. So you can offload in a different way to them. And
Yep.
you can have, we always talk about the dark sense of humor and how with your colleagues you can share that, and it allows you to decompress. And it's such an
Yeah.
important part of processing, isn't it? And
Yeah.
processing
Massive.
the job. I think that to lose that must have significant impact.
Yeah.
Well, and you didn't even realise that's kind of what you were doing at the time.
No.
You know, it's with hindsight, and you look back and you think, actually, yeah, that was your way of just offloading. And like you say, with other people that understand what
Yeah.
you're doing, what you're seeing. Then the next day, if you're kind of having a bit of a wobble, you just go, did I do, you know, I went to this, I am right in feeling like this, aren't I, about something, you know, and you'd have that because they've got that understanding. I think it's gone. And again, when I've talked to CSIs now, that's the message that I hear.
Really?
Yeah.
It's really sad
Yeah.
for that to go, because like Ange says, we've always said that's one of the huge ways that we would decompress and handle what we were dealing with. And like you say, I think as you're going through this stuff, you don't think of what your coping mechanisms are really in that time. But through our business and the work we do, it's one of the questions that comes up really frequently is, how do you deal with seeing the sights you see? How do you deal with seeing it, the en masse volume of it that you see? And that's one of the main things we always say, speaking with your colleagues, the dark sense of humour that Ange mentioned there. And they're two of the main ones, I think, that a lot of other practitioners we've spoke to have said the same. So would you say those are the coping mechanisms? Have you got any other coping mechanisms that you found really helpful as well?
Yeah, I suppose, and again, we'll probably move on to this. So where I've now started to do research in this sort of area, where I've put out questionnaires to CSIs and asked about coping mechanisms, that is probably the top one, is talking with colleagues, family, sometimes. And again, they may not understand, but that's your closest. But obviously, they haven't got that inside knowledge, I suppose.
No, and it's difficult because sometimes you don't want to traumatize them because they're not from that world. And a lot of,
absolutely,
I think families sometimes don't realize even the things that you're doing and seeing.
No, because I didn't talk to my other half. Very rarely.
Very rarely.
Yeah. Again, because it's you know it's not normal things that you're seeing. And I think, you know, those images, and I'm sure you've got them, there's jobs that you will always remember and they'll always stay with you. And I don't think that's fair for me to put that image into somebody's head unnecessarily. So I didn't used to talk about jobs. We'd just talk general, but I wouldn't go into detail. Coping mechanism of mine, I suppose, it was exercise, getting out. I mean, at the time I had 2 dogs, so getting out and walking dogs, and then obviously had child. So then that changes everything. That takes up the time.
As a distraction technique.
Yeah. I think it was that chatting. I mean, I've got family members that have served as police officers, so I was able to talk to them as well, and being able to just somebody else to have that understanding helps massively. But most of that again was dark sense of humour, and you know, discussing it, or oh yeah, I went on this job. I went similar, you know, and that's the processing time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. There is, and then obviously then it can turn to dark coping mechanisms as well, with alcohol.
etc. A lot of people turn to alcohol, actually, don't they?
Yeah.
It's easy to do though, isn't it? At the end of a stressful shift, you come back and you think, oh, I'll just have a little glass of wine, or I'll just have a little gin or something like that. It's so easy to do and just calms you in that moment. Like you say, it's not a healthy mechanism in the long term, but in that moment, sometimes it is an easy thing to do.
It's interesting because now I sort of do some work with Service Dogs UK, which is where we are assisting veterans and 999 personnel
Amazing
that have had PTSD with assistance dogs, and obviously training up the dogs to assist the veterans. And I was chatting to obviously I chat to them all, but one in particular, they weren't aware that they had PTSD, and then other problems came off the back of that because they didn't know what was wrong, so they found another coping mechanism. So
that's really interesting.
Yeah. So it's recognizing, and I think, and again, where I've said there's improvements and changes are for the better, I think forces are doing better around mental well-being for police officers and for forensic practitioners now. But I still think there's huge improvement to be made.
I was gonna say it was one of the things that I was gonna ask, actually, because obviously this conversation is specifically about mental health and the impact that the job has. And one of the issues that we encountered, and we don't know if it was the same for you, was some of the stigma attached around either asking for help or owning the fact that your mental health had been impacted. And there was often a lot of stigma in forces. And we've seen some improvements, but we're not sure like how much or how far that's gone. Did you go through similar things? Did you find that there was quite a bit of stigma around them?
Yeah, so I suppose for your listeners, so I had PTSD, and that's one of the reasons I left the role of CSI, amongst other reasons, but that was the main reason. Just I'll give you a short background on that, because I think the more we talk about it, the more that stigma is removed.
Definitely. It's one of the reasons we wanted to do this episode, is to raise awareness and talk about it.
So I think for me, it was there a stigma? Absolutely. How I was treated by some colleagues was questionable, particularly some management. And I don't think there was any menace at all in it. I don't think, or malice at all. I think it was more, they didn't really know where to signpost me, what to do, really.
What to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But, and having a good line manager makes such a difference in these situations. I suppose my background in this side of things and why I've got into the research I've got into. So, as I said, I had a baby, went off on maternity leave. All was fine, all was well. Came back, so she was about 9.5 months old at the time, still baby in arms.
Still baby.
I've been back about 2.5 months, and I was sent to a SUDI, so sudden, unexpected death of an infant. Knew it was going to be my worst job you could go to as a new mum. Worst job.
They're really difficult jobs to go to anyway. Let alone
absolutely.
We had this thing in our force that if something like that came in, the officers on without kids would offer to take those jobs, because often people who had children found them much harder. So to be a new mum, she's only 9 months still, and only be back a couple of months, that must have been horrendous.
Yeah,
it must have.
Yeah, and like I said, the day is ingrained in my brain. It won't go away. But yeah, and it was the classic, you're the only one available. Excellent. Okay. But it was also just my personality. I was like, no, I can do this. I'm strong. I then got asked to take a trainee with me. And it's hard enough to deal with them. But in my mind at the time, should I have said no at the time? Yes, hindsight is the best tool in the world. Yes, I should have. But at the same time, I was thinking, actually, might be a good distraction.
To be training. Yeah.
And actually quite pragmatic about it. And so off we went. The case was a 1-day-old baby, 24 hours old. With suspected sexual abuse.
Oh
no.
Rebecca.
Yeah. So obviously it's horrific anyway, 1-day-old, to have that on top. Thankfully, the sexual abuse element was ruled out quite quickly. When you go into CDs, it was at the hospital. You're in a room with obviously the doctors, nurses, and something called a rapid response nurse, who you then have to go to the scene as well with them. It's a really strange process unless you've had to deal with it, to try and explain it to somebody. Having to put a baby or a child into a body bag is horrendous.
It is.
1-day-old baby. Horrendous. You've also got the family, not in the room with you, but obviously they're outside. You can hear they are distraught. Absolutely distraught. I suppose your experience and everything kicks in. You go through the process that you need to go through. Obviously, I've got the training with me. I'm explaining what's happening and why we're doing what we're doing. liaising with police officers, senior investigating officer, rapid response nurse. So you've got a huge amount going on.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds really, really odd, and I guess you would totally understand, and those colleagues listening will understand as well, is you find your own coping mechanism in that time.
Yeah.
You know, and I've dealt with many CDs before that. And I kind of just take 5 minutes out, away from everybody. And again, it's that decompression, it's that processing. I've tried to do that at this time, but obviously there's a huge amount of people in that room. Then got the trainer going, what do I do with this? Where shall I put this? What's happening now? Didn't have that time to even have that headspace as such. Then had to go to the scene, which again is quite a normal process, where you're going and looking at obviously living conditions. And again, you're there with the officers, you're there with the rapid response nurse. You might be looking at last feeds, nappies, bedding, etc., depending on the circumstances. So you're kind of almost dealing with two scenes.
Yeah.
In one hit as such. I went back to the office, and I don't know what I was feeling, if I'm quite honest. I was just kind of just getting on with stuff. You know, I'd done what I had to do with all the exhibits, carried on with the rest of my shift, and I just remember thinking, I just want to go home. That's all I can remember. I just want to go home, and I want to see my little girl. Obviously, by the time shift's over, gone home, and I remember coming home. She was fast asleep in her cot, and I remember just holding her hand that night. Didn't cry, because I just didn't feel anything. It was very odd. Like I just felt numb.
Bit numb.
Just needed to know she was okay. And then again, it's something that I think only those that have done it and been in that situation, you kind of give yourself a bit of processing time. And for me, it used to be a week with those sorts of, or any sort of traumatic job. Give myself a week, because your brain's obviously got to process everything that you've dealt with, images, etc. I then went into rest days. And I suppose looking back at it, I knew something wasn't right, because I started to see the baby's face. And then I started seeing resemblance with my daughter. And I was just like, oh, this is weird. And I haven't experienced this before. Again, carried on just going, give yourself that time. Give yourself the week. I don't know why I say a week, but that was for me, you know, because then you start to deal with everything else. And by that time, you normally have processed everything. I then went into my manager at the time and just said, I can't get this baby's face out of my head. At night time, it's constantly there. And I said, and I've just got this feeling, and I couldn't describe the feeling. And even to this day, I can't describe that feeling. Heaviness, I suppose, is the only way I can kind of describe it. To which I was then told at that point I had to refer myself for a trim. So trauma risk incident management. So I did.
Not that your management would refer you or anything like that. You have to do it yourself.
Yep.
I mean, you shouldn't have been sent to that job in the first instance to start, but then they're asking you to self-refer after you've approached them and told them the visions that you have and how you're feeling.
I did, and the trim assessor was amazing, absolutely amazing. I then told her, you know, she said, actually, it can take up to 28 days or so for your brain to process everything. Give yourself a bit of time, be kind on yourself. Fine. At that point, I was going into some annual leave and actually going on family holiday. And it was the worst blooming holiday I've ever had.
Really?
Yeah, that's when it really, again, when you look back at it, things were really not good. So off we went. Obviously, you're in a different environment, different house. Obviously, I had travel cot. Always had like a little breathing monitor for my little one.
Yeah.
And again, that's just through, I suppose, experiences that I've gone through before, where I've gone to Sudis before. So, you know, when I had Bubba, I got the breathing monitor, and
you become much more vigilant and aware of things, don't you?
Because you've seen it and you know it happens. So yeah, set up all of that. And again, it's only when you look back, I became really distant from my partner. We started to bicker and argue quite a lot. I wasn't sleeping well at all. I was going in and checking on my little one probably up to about 20 times a night. I was absolutely convinced she wasn't breathing. So
awful.
So obviously then sleep deprivation kicked in with that, which then affects everything, and that's a downward spiral really. And then I remember where my partner and I weren't getting on great that time. He went off on bike ride or out for a walk or something. We were literally on the beach. So I got my little one, in the carrier and 2 dogs. But yeah, we had steps down onto that. And I remember walking, and I just walked for miles, just blank. Didn't know that I was walking on quicksand with 2 dogs. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Yeah. And it was only because my partner came back and he just went, "What the hell were you thinking?" And that's the thing, I wasn't thinking.
You just weren't.
It was just, yeah. And he was like, "What is wrong?" And again, I didn't know at the time. So then fast forward and I went back to work. The first email that I open up is about that job. Bang, I was straight back. Everything came flooding back. I then got hold of the trim assessor I originally saw, and I said, "This is where I'm at. I can't do this. I can't cope." To which then I obviously got signed off through occupational health, etc. And again, thank God I had dogs at the time, honestly, because it got me out. I had a purpose with little one, getting out and walking. And I remember going to the forest with the dogs, and I honestly felt like I was going mad at this point. I didn't know what was wrong. I couldn't describe really what I was feeling. I was having flashbacks. Anything to do with baby, obviously, apart from my own, I just couldn't cope.
Had the trim assessor or occupational health diagnosed you with PTSD at that point, or did you not know what was going on? Can you just say again what TRIM means, please? What TRIM stands for?
Yes, it's Trauma Risk Incident Management.
Trauma Risk Incident Management.
But no, they can't diagnose. So I ended up going through my occupational health unit, and again, the nurse practitioner I saw was amazing, absolutely amazing. And I remember in that forest, phone call came and it was occupational health. She introduced herself and she said, "Right, I've read obviously everything that's been going on through all the trim referrals." And she just said, went through all my symptoms, went through obviously what happened on holiday. And I said, "I'm paranoid." I said, "I cannot switch off." And I'll never forget her words to me. She said, "My dear, you are not going mad." She said, "You are suffering from acute PTSD symptoms."
Oh, I've just got
and I remember
chills then.
Well, I remember just kind of collapsing in a heap in the forest on the ground and just sobbing my heart out, because suddenly it kind of, and even then I didn't really understand what PT. I think we've all probably heard of it. We know that a lot of force veterans, we've heard of it probably through that more so, but I still didn't really understand it.
Yeah.
But somebody had given me, I mean, some would call it a label, but it was an answer. It was like, okay, I'm not going mad. There is something. Mad. Yeah. And then that began the long process of obviously recovery. So I had to see psychotherapists and have therapy. And I used to call it, I can smile and laugh back at it now, voodoo. I was like, this is voodoo. I don't know what this is doing. And actually, it didn't work the first time. I had to have 2 lots of something called EMDR therapy.
Oh, really?
Sometimes they do it with lights. I had it with sounds and sort of vibration plates in my hand. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a medical expert at all, but it's basically getting your brain to shift images and process them.
And is EMDR frequently used to treat PTSD?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. And like I said, there's different versions. I know some ex-colleagues that have had sort of light therapy with it. Like I said, I'm not an expert in it, and hence I used to call it voodoo, because I was like, this, and it did work. Eventually, like I said, I had to go through 2 lots of it, and I'd done the classic shutdown, and I would talk about everything else but what I really needed to talk about in the first sort of therapy. And you have to be quite open to it because you don't understand it.
Yeah.
And again, I'm quite a logical person. I need to understand. So then I started to do some research on PTSD and trying to understand sort of the EMDR stuff. I still couldn't explain that.
Yeah.
But it works. It does what it needs to do.
That's the important thing.
But yeah, it was a long journey. And it's still, PTSD you find ways of coping and they give you coping mechanisms. But I had to go through part of that therapy where I was flooded. And as soon as he said that, I knew what was coming. So with my background as well, I'm also a trained canine behaviourist, hence the involvement with service dogs. But I knew what flooding techniques are, and it's facing your fears, and I literally had to stare at image after image after image of dead babies.
Really? I've not heard of that technique,
Yeah.
That's the first time I've ever heard of it. That sounds brutal.
It does.
Yeah, it's quite extreme. Again, it's extreme cases. It's not something that's used all the time.
Yeah.
And what does that flooding do? What is the purpose of flooding your brain?
It's causing a reaction, and it's that fight or flight.
Okay.
It's that exposure. And normally that's done gradually. But sometimes it is literally just flooding the brain. And again, not a psychologist, so any psychologist listening, if I've got it wrong, then please correct me. But yeah, it's not used all the time. But what came out of that therapy as well, and this is where I was saying earlier about the frequency of exposure and the accumulation of that exposure, is that incident was kind of the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
And if you like, it's probably is what broke me. And I was broken at the time when I look back at it. But it was the accumulation. There was jobs that started coming up that I thought I'd dealt with. And obviously short term, yes, I had, but they were still there. So I had to go right back to sort of a triple shooting I dealt with. And that was quite early in my career. Some other SUDIs that came out of that as well. Some quite violent murders. Things had just accumulated. And I think because I had exposure to quite traumatic scenes quite early in my career, as much as I thought at the time, yeah, that's great, exciting, and this is what I want to do, I didn't know how to cope with that.
Yeah.
There was no training, there was no advice. And again, because you're talking to your colleagues, you think, right, you've processed it and it's done. So quite a lot came out of that therapy. Obviously, then you get the coping mechanisms. But it has changed me. It's changed me as a person. It's changed my perspective on things. I used to absolutely love horror films. I was a horror fanatic.
Really?
Even then, even if I go back, I still didn't like anything with children. So maybe there's something in that anyway. But horror films, loved them. PTSD, because you kind of live in, and I'll simplify it as much as I can, it's something called hypervigilance. You're living kind of in that fight, flight all the time. It's your body fighting against it, doesn't know what to do. You're getting flooded with cortisol. And that's why you feel kind of on edge.
So you're not switching off that fight or flight mechanism. You're constantly
and then you're just like, don't know what to do. So obviously horror films, you're flooding your body with the adrenaline, your cortisol.
Yeah.
Even now, I don't always know how to deal with that. And it's something I'm having to learn all these years on. But there is still times that PTSD can creep up on you. And it's just you find your own coping mechanisms.
So is it something that now you just have to learn to live with and be conscious of? And so you're now more aware when things start to happen for you, or you have some triggers.
Yeah. Thankfully, for me it's not that often, but yeah, they can still come. One program I cannot watch ever since, called The Midwife.
Oh, really?
Yep, because there's always some injured child, dead baby. Won't watch it. And I think that's also, you become quite aware of what can trigger you.
Yeah.
So you don't put yourself in that situation.
So how long had you been in the job at this point when you went to this job?
So my little one, 2016, it was literally towards the end of my career.
So you'd been in about 14, 15 years.
Yeah.
And had you had any problems with your mental health up until that point? Or I suppose, is it any that you were conscious of? Because now you've done the therapy, you realise that looking back, there were other things.
No. But yeah, it's that's an interesting topic point in itself, because is there predisposing underlying issues with PTSD? And it's interesting, actually. I was having a conversation yesterday with somebody around this, and they look at it from a completely different point of view, but also fascinated around, is there underlying triggers? Obviously, from my own experience, that's how I got into kind of the research side of it. I'm afforded that opportunity being a lecturer, and it was just something that I was interested in. Obviously, having gone through it myself, seeing where there's improvements that could be made, where I think I was let down. So that began the journey of the research. So I started to get my project students involved, and that's how the surveys have gone out. And we started to collect data, and it was quite overwhelming when I first put out the surveys to CSIs. I mean, one survey that went out, I think they've got completed 99 responses in 3 days.
That's brilliant, isn't it, for surveys?
Yes.
Really, yeah,
Fantastic.
which then spoke volumes. I was like, there's a need. There's a problem. There's a gap here. Because when I've talked to colleagues, you know, it was like, yeah, I felt like that, you know, and in those conversations, things come out. So yeah, the research is still ongoing, but we've now kind of moved on from all the responses that we've got. And I think it's important for people, particularly in this profession or forensic practitioners, because obviously there's digital examiners that are seeing horrendous images, and there's a huge amount of research going on around that and support mechanisms in place. But I still think there's gaps. So we've kind of moved on to what are the preventatives? Because when people have got to where I got to, it's too late.
Yeah.
It's too late. You're there and you're suffering already.
You're suffering, and then also left the job, all that experience, that career that you loved.
Yep.
You felt you couldn't carry on with anymore.
Yep.
That's significant impact on your life.
Yeah.
Yep. It did. And that's the thing, I still liked the job. And again, like you say, that experience, and hence that's why I went into teaching on that side of it, because it is that experience and knowledge and the passion as well, because actually it is a fantastic career.
Yeah.
You know, if you take away that side of it, but I think this is where I am seeing progress and changes, in the sense there is more education around it coming into the role. There's much more support in place. Whether it's being signposted or not is another thing. So something else that I sit on is the Forensic Capability Network. I sit on a wellbeing group, and it is for forensic practitioners, to which I've also had some contribution towards a toolkit that has gone out to all 43 police forces in England and Wales.
Brilliant.
And I think that the next lot of work for all of us sitting on that group is then to look at how is it being used, and all that side of things as well. So, you know, and it is a great toolkit. There's a huge amount of support that is available, but I don't know how many people are aware.
I was going to say that would be really interesting, because I wonder how much stigma is still attached, and how much stigma is around mental health, and putting your hand up and saying, actually, I'm struggling, I need help, where do I go?
Yeah. And I think there is still. I mean, obviously I talk about it and I am open about it. Like I said, it's removing that stigma and it's getting that word out there. Actually, there is nothing to be ashamed of, but we shouldn't be letting people get to that point.
To that stage.
So that's kind of the next stage for me, is looking at preventatives. And one of those things may be around mandatory screening. You know, there are other departments that have to have mandatory screening and psychological assessments every year in their role.
Really?
Some will argue that it's become a bit of a tick box exercise. So it's looking at actually, how do we make this meaningful? There are some forces that are looking at doing a mandatory screening process before. Obviously, you have all your medical stuff before you join the police as a CSI. But I never, ever had any sort of psychological assessment at all. And I suppose it links back to that kind of, is there predisposing issues, conditions that may affect, and doesn't mean that you wouldn't get the job, but actually what support needs to be in place for you.
Yeah.
You know, line managers, and again, you know, I do not want to do a blanket approach, because there are some fantastic line managers out there within CSI units, you know, that are very, very proactive around the wellbeing side of things. Some forces are really proactive, and I know Essex and Thames Valley are doing a huge amount around their wellbeing provisions.
That's fantastic to hear.
For police staff as well, because I think we hear a lot about police officers. Obviously, that was all in the news a couple of years back, wasn't it? Around 1 in 5 police officers suffer from PTSD. And I think there is research out there, but not just for CSIs. We kind of get, as I say we, because I still refer to myself as we, as one of them.
Yeah, do you know, we do the same. Yeah, we do it.
With, you know, when I've looked at doing my own research, and obviously I'm looking at previous research, you're lumped in with either forensic practitioners, forensic personnel, scene examiners, or forensic, and some. There's nothing just for crime scene. Well, there was one study that was just for CSIs back in 2005. So that's kind of where I'm at with that side of it. It's ongoing because it's so multi-layered. There's so many different factors that come into this. And interesting, when I first, because it was Forensic Capability Network that I did one of their first research festivals back in 21, where I actually did a presentation on this with my research up to that point.
Yeah.
But it was the first time I ever done my own lived experience, which was terrifying.
I was going to say, how was that?
Oh, it was terrifying. Hence, I'm able to talk about it now. I've done it. But yeah, it was terrifying because I'm at my most vulnerable.
Well, I think it's amazing that you can talk so candidly about it and be so open and honest, because it will mean so much to a lot of people who are struggling and who haven't got that ability yet to be able to talk about it, who don't really know where to go, because you are opening yourself up to such vulnerability. And I think that's one of the scariest things for us humans to do, isn't it? Is be vulnerable. So I think that it's amazing. The work that you're doing is incredible as well. And hopefully we'll go a long way to helping a lot of other practitioners.
I hope so. It's just, obviously, I've got to get word out there. So, and, you know, and I think where there has been this take up of trying to find out what CSIs need, what support, there's been a huge amount of surveys going out. And wellbeing, obviously, you've got the National Police Staff Police Survey that goes out. There's a lot of surveys that go out. So the responses last time were okay, but I need more.
Want some more.
You know, I need to represent it. They're anonymous. You know, the only thing that would be identifiable is region, not even police force. You know, the more that contribute to it, hopefully something will change. It takes time. It takes time to do research and get things published, etc. as well. But interestingly, off the back of that first presentation that I did, I had CSIs contact me personally by email, and some of the stories were absolutely heartbreaking.
Really?
So I know there is a need for it. And like I said, things have improved, and I've seen it improve, but it's not in every force. You're still hearing of different things going on, different management of situations as well. So there is still a lot of improvement to be done.
I think definitely. And we've just got to talk about it more and more. Got to eliminate that stigma.
Yeah.
Yep.
And raise that awareness. And I think that's the only way to do it, isn't it?
It is. And I think I feel for occupational health units and forces as well, because they have a huge amount of work coming their way. And there is so many different roles within policing that do so many different things. You know, how can they tailor? And I haven't necessarily got the answer to that at the moment. And I think, you know, my therapy, I was outsourced to a specialist that dealt with my condition at the time. And then I think there's different levels of PTSD as well. And PTSD is like your extreme worst case scenario, you know, but there's all the other things that lead up to that. So like your vicarious trauma, your burnout, stress, it all starts, and it's that accumulation. And unfortunately, PTSD is the extreme. And I think, you know, some of the feedback I had from CSIs was, we don't all have PTSD. Absolutely no. And thankfully, no, you don't. You know, like I said, that's your extreme worst case. But actually, what's all the levels in between? And it's, again, looking at how do we prevent and how to get people to recognise. There is only so much you can say to people. Look, there's all of this information out here. Some people will take it on board, others won't. But again, if your colleagues are looking out for you, normally it's actually the colleagues that will pick up and go, something's not right with
Something's
whoever it
not
may
quite
be.
right.
Yeah, or go and have that chat. We should be talking, we should be looking out for each other, but also for managers to be aware, to have that training in place, knowing where to signpost. You know, and I know that in the ideal world, I'm a line manager myself. It is hard. It's hard because you've got so many other things to be doing, but without your staff, nothing's going to work. And that doesn't matter whether it's police, privatised companies, you've got to look after your staff. And I think having those 5-minute chats every week, you know, and just checking in,
makes a big difference.
Makes a big difference, and it makes a difference to you as the employee that time as well.
Yeah,
my personal opinion, of course.
No, I agree with you.
Me
it really
too.
does. I think that it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because you said it earlier, where you pushed yourself at that job because you were like, oh, it's my job. And people think, oh, it's my job. It's what I signed up for. I've just got to deal with it. And then you do it and you're okay because you develop some coping mechanisms and you go. That I think that we become complacent. And I don't know that we always recognize some of the changes in ourselves or some of what's going on with ourselves. It may even be small things like you've had a bad shift or you've been to an awful job, and when you get home and you want that glass of wine, for instance, or you're a bit snappy, like somebody can say something to you and you're just snapping at them, and it's nothing they've done or not their fault, and you don't even realize why you're reacting in the way that you do, or you become a bit more like you said, detached from you were detached from your partner, pulling away or shutting down, or you start pulling away from people and you're a bit more closed off. There's so many small kind of signs and symptoms, isn't there, that we probably don't realize. We're just putting it down to, oh, we're knackered, I've done 6 shifts this week and I've been kept on this many times and I'm on shift, what do you expect? There's so many reasons and excuses, and you see so much awful stuff that you don't think people always piece it together until it happens to them.
Yeah, you're spot on. It's just trying to find ways of, I suppose, educating everyone, because, you know, PTSD, we're obviously talking about our own careers and as crime scene investigators, but a huge amount of people from different, you can be a witness to something traumatic and have a form of PTSD, you know. So it's about getting that education of actually recognise all these, like you say, these little things before they become something that's horrendous.
Yeah, and I thankfully have not suffered with PTSD, but I know that I can still now close my eyes and put myself back in scenes. I know that I can close my eyes and be at a job and be with a body and still see their faces. And I always think that I've been really fortunate with my mental health in that respect, but then it's clearly there.
Yeah.
But it's just how you process it, in the sense it's not affecting your day-to-day life. You know, you're not having flashbacks to it. But that's the thing, and it's something that obviously I'm hugely passionate about the subject, so I could talk for ages on it, but it's something that I've brought into the curriculum within the course at ARU as well. Brilliant. Because I think we are, you know, we're bringing the next lot of CSIs potentially into courses, fantastic. Detectives, etc. So yeah, it is part of within some of the modules it's talked about, because, and it's the same when we show any images, you know, there's always a warning before we put up anything sensitive. And I'll never forget, I had one student that said to me, but that's what we're going to be seeing. It's like, yeah, but once you see something, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
You know, and you've just literally just summed that up in the sense you could close your eyes and you can be back there because you've seen it. It's, you know, that terminology, I suppose, of burnt on the memory, isn't it? But so it is something I say to my students, you know, this is why we don't just show you any old photos or scenes or anything just for the fun of it. There is context to it, but also understand. And I know there's that morbid fascination of people, you know, some students, oh, I love it, you know, 15 years of it or more, you know, CSIs that have been in the job for 20, 30 years have seen more. It does stay with you. So it's something that I think they need to be aware of, and even if you get some students, we're not training CSIs, that's just one potential career they could go into. But it's like as a detective, because we have a lot that will go on to detective route, fast track detectives, and it's like you still got to go to scenes. You're still going to see things.
Yeah.
Go on to be a photographer within the police. You're going to be processing images, digital analysts. At some point, you're going to either hear or see. So it's actually something you've got to be aware of and prepared for. And I think this is where forces also need to probably communicate a bit more with universities, training establishments of actually what do you need in a person as well? What are you looking for now? And how can we prepare those going into these different roles?
I think it's amazing that you're building that into the curriculum and looking at doing it, because if you can do that at that training level, people are going in more robust and more resilient. But more than that, hopefully, because I think a lot of us scene investigators are robust and resilient anyway. It's not about that, is it? But it's maybe a bit more about that self-awareness, that being conscious of things that are bothering you and some of the responses and reactions that you're having, living in a much more conscious way in your body and knowing and recognizing yourself, actually.
Yeah. And also having that voice to say, actually, this is affecting me.
That takes a lot in itself, doesn't it? To open your mouth and say, actually, like it sounds like you recognised quite quickly that you weren't coping and that you needed to speak to someone, which that in itself is such a massive step actually to take, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it was, like I said, it was that holiday and checking on my daughter 20 times a night is just not normal behaviour. And I say the other thing, I mean, everyone loves a list. I love a list. Always got a list of things to do. We all like a list.
We love a list.
But it got to the point and maybe a psychologist or psychotherapist can, and it's something I never asked, but always been interesting, because I started making lists about everything. Everything had to have a list and a structure. And I don't know if that's just because my brain was a little bit not working as it should have. And for me, I think it was around control, because I felt out of control. If I look back at it now.
Out of control,
yeah. So that was kind of my thing. And lists, to-do lists of everything, like I said, the checking on my daughter, just not functioning. And it's still, even now, it's still hard to describe. When you go onto autopilot sometimes, when you drive somewhere and you think, how the hell did I get there?
Yeah.
That too sometimes. But that's how I felt like I was all the time.
That was just an awful
not present. It's just such a weird thing. And I think anybody that's probably had PTSD will probably understand, because you can't really describe it. I just felt on edge all the time. Obviously, sleep deprivation did not help that at all.
It's the worst thing, isn't it? You don't get much sleep as a scene investigator anyway when you're on shift.
Well, shifts in general, and there's obviously a huge amount of research on shift workers anyway. Yeah. Thankfully for me, yes, I can talk about it now. I know there's others that probably still can't, even years later. But for me, I just don't see how we're going to progress. For CSIs, there's got to be more awareness of what's out there, how it's implemented, and like I said, in those preventatives, what are those preventatives? So that's my next sort of focus,
I think that's
is to actually hear from CSIs, what do you think would help?
Yeah.
Obviously, getting it through ethics, etc. We have to go through all of that, but hopefully that will do some good. And then it's a case of let's try and make some difference. But it's also something that I will then obviously be able to input within the toolkit with the FCN and say, look, this is what's needed. Like the toolkit's there, and it'd be interesting to see actually, is it being used? Are people even aware of it? So we shall see what comes of it. But we can't keep letting people get to the stage of PTSD.
No.
I think it's really amazing that you're taking your lived experience, and now you've changed fields and changed career, but you're taking that experience and doing that research and putting it back into the field, still giving to the field. I think
give it a positive. It's like, I'll try not to use explicits, but it was a horrendous time.
Yeah.
It was horrendous. And I think it's just trying to see the positive in it, and actually how can just one experience change. And if I can, even if, just getting those emails afterwards, I was like, I've done something.
Yeah.
It's made a difference, even if that's just to one person, And then I think some forces started to form their own sort of subgroups on wellbeing. I think CSIs now, because they have been surveyed through different platforms, for different reasons, not by their own force, then there's national ones, then you've got researchers out there doing stuff as well. They're like, well, we don't see anything come from this. So I suppose my message from that is I'm trying to do something with the research, but it takes time.
Yeah.
To be able to work with the force would be great. A couple of forces would be even better, but again, there's so many barriers that you have to go through to get the say so. But it comes back to stigma as well. People don't necessarily. I don't think there's going to be a quick fix to that.
No.
But I'd like to think, because mental health is talked about so much more, if you go back 10 years, it is talked about so much more now. So hopefully we just keep going in that direction.
Yeah, it's becoming more of a priority, isn't it? Which is a really great thing, I think.
Yeah. And I think we also saw out of the back of COVID as well, children's mental health.
There's been a mental health crisis really since COVID, hasn't there?
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah. And again, it's the strain on the services. That's a whole nother issue as well.
Yeah, the system's on its knees, really.
So I think the more that we can try and help through research and making people aware and what to look out for in your colleagues. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to go in and speak to that colleague direct, but maybe to the line manager and just say, not sure about Susan, for example.
Important.
And for line managers as well, to be aware of what people are dealing with. And again, like I said, there are some fantastic managers I know that are doing this and keep an eye on jobs coming in, quite aware if somebody's gone to some traumatic things, that they have a bit of a break and go off and just do the volume stuff and just, for that time. And I know there is some really good practice going on out there.
That's really good
There's
to
also,
hear.
unfortunately, not.
It is.
And I think it's getting that consistency to everyone.
Well, hopefully with things like the toolkit that you mentioned, and then the research that you're doing, hopefully some good will come of all that, and we'll just keep progressing in this area. And wish you all the luck with your research, and we'll keep an eye out for it and share it and things like that for you when we see it come
That'd be amazing.
It's a fantastic subject, and I think you're doing such good work in this field. Even like you say, voicing your story and telling people what you've gone through can make such a difference. So really appreciate you sharing it with us as well.
Well, like I said, even if it helps one person, that's
fingers crossed. We hope so. Hopefully this will go out across the airwaves, and it'll certainly help.
And just help.
Hopefully at least one person.
CSI it's a tough job. It's a good job. It's a good career, but it's tough. And I just think they need support. In particular, you think about if you've come in, I think I was 21, pushing on 22 when I took on the job. You kind of know what you signed up, but you don't.
You don't really.
No.
You don't. Yeah. You're going to be dealing with some major part. You're going to be dealing with deaths, but until you're in it,
you see the most bizarre, weird, wonderful things.
Like you couldn't make it up type things.
You couldn't. And you see some of the worst of humanity as well. And I don't think that you even expect it, because, well, for me, I can only speak for myself. I couldn't believe some of the things I was seeing, because I couldn't believe humans would treat other humans like that. I was just like, how? And often it was just like, God bless you, like a sneeze, like nobody give a shit. Just stab your mate and crack on, and off you go to the next pub. Like, what?
And it's, for me, and I think you've asked me about the changes sort of within forces and CSI role, but crime type has changed as well. And I think for me, and I know we've had previous talks around this, the level of violence that you see
has gone up.
So what you say, like people, what they do to one another, but you'd go to an assault, and let's just say it was your pub brawl after hours kick up, probably a full moon, and punch, until you're knocked out type of thing. And that was it. People walk away. Not always, but the majority of the time. That's now. No, it's not good enough. We'll stamp on heads or knife you.
Wait till people are down, and whilst they're down, stamp on them.
Yeah, or 6 people into one. Yeah, and I think that level of violence has changed, which again is obviously that level of trauma has increased because of what you're getting exposed to is horrific. Some of the injuries, domestic violence, and obviously we've talked about COVID, but obviously domestic violence cases went up, child abuse cases.
Yeah.
It was, and we've only heard about the ones that are high profile in the news.
Yeah,
that's it, because we know there's hundreds more on top of that you're not hearing about.
Yeah. So that level of violence has massively changed in crime type.
Do you know, we were literally talking to Julie Bramble about it, who's an ex-crime scene investigator from Kent, actually, and she was literally saying the same thing the other day. The level of violence, even from her starting. So she started, I think, in 2016. And she was saying even in her time, the level of violence has gone up significantly.
Yeah, the world's changed. If I go back to when I first started as CSI to when I left and just seeing that difference in crime type, massive shift.
It has. With regards to PTSD, is there any one particular thing that triggers? Like, there's a lot of build-up of stuff that we were talking about, but do they know what specifically causes it? No,
not to my knowledge, but again, like I said, I've done some research into it, but I wouldn't be able to go into like that level of it. It's probably different for everyone, though. That's the thing. I'll never forget one colleague tell me, "Do you know how lucky you are to be getting the treatment you're getting? Back in my day, I was just told it's your job, get on with it."
Wow. And there's the problem.
Yeah.
That's exactly where the problem is.
And there's your stigma comes into that. Or, oh, I've had that. I know how you feel. You don't know how I feel because it's different for everybody and you've got a different experience of it. And I would never dare say that to my veterans that I'm working with. I don't know how you're feeling because you may have a very different experience from me. You may have a completely different type of PTSD from me.
Yeah.
So, in that, are the symptoms of PTSD different? Or are there some very similar ones that are recognisable? Or?
Yeah, there is. So there's different scales, I suppose. There are certain things that will determine diagnosis.
So there are some symptoms that are kind of across the board, but then the whole experience is unique to everyone.
Yeah, and I think how you deal with it, obviously we're all humans, we're all independent, we've all got different coping mechanisms. You may be suggested by a therapist. Some people have CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, which again, I think that's become quite a common, most people know what that is now. EMDR, you've got all sorts, medication. So it's hard to put on medication as well, just to try and even out, because obviously there's the chemical imbalance in the brain, and I was also put on beta blockers.
And how did you find the medication? Was it helpful?
Yes. Again, stigma.
Yeah.
Didn't want to go on it. But after talking with, because obviously I was, as well as occupational health, I obviously had my own GP. And we talked about it. As well as going for the therapy, there's still the physical side. Obviously, my cortisol levels were sky high. My heart rate's up. Yes, therapy had its place, but the physical symptoms are still there. And it was just that hypervigilance side of things. So you've got to get that under control. And as we all know, cortisol is not good for your body, especially a long exposure of it, stress. So I kind of had a two-pronged approach, as they say. But yeah, there's different ways of treating.
Like I say, it's about finding the right thing for you, isn't it?
And for the person as well. I suppose from my experience of it and where I've talked to people that have been through it, is the acceptance.
Yeah.
That's hard. I was grateful to have somebody say that to me, on that day where I said, collapsed in a heap and realised I wasn't going mad, because you do, well, I certainly felt, maybe it's all in my head, maybe it's me, and you start doubting yourself, and maybe it's just I can't cope with the job anymore. So all that self-doubt creeps in as well.
A hard step to take, but an important one.
Grateful for it, but then you kind of just got to go, right, how do we fix this?
Yeah.
And it's a long old road.
Yeah. Because again, it's that stigma, isn't it? Now I've got to accept it, but then
deal with it.
In accepting it, it's like almost accepting, like, I don't know, you haven't coped, or is there something wrong, or
Yep. And then that comes back to your stigma again, because then you feel like it's a weakness.
yeah.
And I did contemplate. I was like, do I go back to the job? And at one point there was a conversation of, we would really like you to come back. Again, you're experienced, you're good at your job, etc. But what about if you don't go to Sudis anymore? I was just like, you can't guarantee me that.
No.
I was the only one available at the time. So
Yeah.
you can't guarantee me that. And also, actually, what I've just been through is horrendous, or still going through at the time. No, not taking that chance. Just,
No.
it's not worth it. It's not worth my health and also my family's. Because, as much as I was suffering, they were suffering.
Yeah, there's a ripple effect from these things, isn't
Absolutely.
there?
Yeah.
You're the nucleus, but actually not you, like one is the nucleus, but then that ripple effect goes out to everybody around you.
And it does. And, hugely grateful to my partner. I mean, we've been together for a long time. But yeah, for putting up with me through that, because I was probably a horrible person to be around. Emotional wreck. And like I said, thank God I had my daughter and the dogs, and just getting me out and keeping me in some form of routine. So, forever grateful to him, because he put up with a lot in that time, and probably felt like he was like, who are you?
Who are you?
Who is this person? Like,
Sounds like you got a good one.
It does.
He's not too bad. He is a gem.
That's lovely.
And even now he knows, for me, it's panic attacks.
Yeah.
They can come out of the blue. They're pretty scary. And I was talking to a veteran that I work with around that. And it's just something, like you said earlier, right at the beginning, it's something you do learn to live with, but you also find your coping mechanisms. And I think that's the other side of the research, is the preventatives, but actually and empowering people to speak up and to find their own coping mechanisms, but healthy ones, obviously.
Yeah. Those healthy ones, not the wine. Don't go for the wine.
Glass now and then. Don't they say that? Medical research? Your glass does you
good. Everything in moderation.
Yeah. And cake. Can't go wrong with a bit of cake.
That's very true.
But there are positives, I hope, have come out of it and will continue to come out of it, and having these conversations. So again, thank you to you both as well for this, because it's the only way things will change.
Thank you so much. I think that seems like a really great place for us to wrap up. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being so candid. And thank you on behalf of all the CSIs out there. I choose to speak for everyone. But for the work that you're doing and the research that you're doing, and that you're taking your lived experience and putting it back in such a positive way. And hopefully, like I say, it sounds like you've already helped people, but hopefully the toolkit that's being developed and the other research and the preventative methods that you're looking into are going to continue to help people and eradicate some of that stigma. And hopefully it's up from here in terms of the way that things are handled. Fingers crossed. So thank you so much, Rebecca. We really appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you.
And a massive thank you to all of our listeners for joining us this week. And we will be with you again in a fortnight's time, when we will take you back underneath the barrier tape.